I lived in Europe for over 2 years, and the contrast between renting there and here is enormous. Sure, the apartment we moved into was stripped bare, even the light fittings were gone, but you had a blank canvas to work on if you intended to stay, and most did. When we moved out, we insisted that the bond inspection be carried out in our presence, as we would in Australia. The immobilier, the agent, who was going to inspect after we had left the country, was a little surprised, but kindly agreed to our request. He said that we had left the property cleaner than he had ever seen before. It was the typical standard to which we had cleaned our dwellings through a 20-year period of renting in Australia. Now compare that with Australia. Like most long-term renters, we have lots of stories. The following one was not the most costly experience. In fact, the pettiness of the situation is part of the point. We rented a house for 4.5 years, and in the final inspection, the only thing out of place the agent could find was 1 centimetre hole in one fly screen. Most likely it was there when we moved in, or it could have been pecked by a bird, who knows. We lived there for 4.5 years, and they charged us to fix a tiny hole in a fly screen. I put the difference between Europe and Australia down to the structure of the rental industry. In Australia, the sector is dominated by small investors, often with only 1 or 2 investment properties, but sometimes with many more, as we know. In Central Europe, the sector is dominated by large investment companies. Large investment companies are interested in the bottom line. They know that a property will depreciate, that there will be normal wear and tear. In Australia, most small investors have virtually all of their savings tied up, and they are paranoid about it. Agents sell their services on their hawk-like qualities. And even though the investor depreciates the house and fittings for taxation purposes, many agents try to extract sufficient bond from the tenant to maintain the place in the same condition as when the tenant first moved in. Personally, I believe that Australian renters would be much better served if the industry restructured and rental housing was primarily supplied by large investment companies and superannuation funds. We all have superannuation, so nobody would be missing out on the investment class. Actually, it would open it up to more people. Importantly, large companies are interested in continuous yield, mostly rental yield, with a small component capital gain, unlike small investors who invest primarily for capital gain. As I've said before, it is the actions of primarily small-scale investors and speculators that have caused the current housing bubble. As a postscript to our personal experience mentioned earlier, 2 months after moving we received a cheque from the real estate agency refunding the cost of the fly screen. Thank you. www.geocities.com/homes4aussies. Standing up for affordable housing for all Australians. Written and spoken by Dr. Brett Edgerton, founder of Homes 4 Aussies.